Welcome back to Haircuts with Dr. Chito. We're going to continue our conversation today with Dr. Shayakaya on Beyond Band-Aids, Preventing Childhood Injuries and Abuse. Please watch the previous episode so that you're able to flow with our conversation today. All right, so here we go as we complete the conversation on Beyond Band-Aids, Preventing Childhood Injuries and Abuse. We've had a great conversation so far. Now, the question I want to ask now is can you discuss the importance of building trust and rapport with both children and parents? Because, that's something to facilitate open communication about sensitive topics such as abuse. I think this comes close to my heart because when I talk here in Nigeria about certain things, yes, we talk about the kids that we see around, but also the vulnerable children that are indigent and don't have that protection. And I don't think we've talked a lot on the national level how to protect these kids effectively. And I'm going to tell you a case where I had a lady who brought in a child in one of the government hospitals. And when I managed the word, oh, my child is bleeding, when I examined the child, I knew that most likely it was a suspected case of abuse. I wanted to admit the child, take the child out of the environment. I remember asking at that time, is there anybody I could contact? No, I was new, fresh, from the US. Is there anybody I can contact? How does this work? What is the can I get a social service person? The mother started denying. I know she fell on a stick. And I was like, no, this is what I'm seeing. And the mother was more concerned through a translator, more concerned of how her child would be viewed. So she rather not deal with it or talk about it. And she feels, her child is just telling stories, nothing happened. That she actually, the trend there said she fell down on a stick. And, I was so concerned. I said, okay, let's admit her. We admitted her. By the time I went upstairs, they've disappeared. So trying to think of both the educated family or the family that knows, okay, this is what I need to do. And even their culture and religion has actually caused that to be a blur as well. How here in this climate can we build that trust and rapport for people to really be open and understand that the victim is never at fault and the victim should never feel like they did something wrong, and especially when it comes to a child.
And I think that's really important. And I think if you talk to a lot of doctors, they've had that experience where stories change, or patients disappear, right? The patient disappeared and you don't know what the patient was. But, to be able to start having those conversations with parents, and I think we need to have those conversations, not just, in our offices, but, on a national, scale. Because it's a huge problem. If you don't talk about it, then it will continue. So how do we have those conversations? Again, for the pediatricians, during the well child visits, I think it's important to engage parents and see how they're having those conversations with their children. Have they had those conversations with their children? Because there's certain things I can do as a pediatrician, but a lot of the work needs to be done at home. And then, we reinforce some of these things that the parents have taught the children. So, things for the parents, like, starting in the age, children are very curious. So they start asking about body parts. Right? And it's important to not be ashamed. There's so much stigma. And we need to sort of try and step out of those things. One is naming body parts, right? Being able to say this is, and not say, your vagina is is a wee-wee. You need to start naming those body parts. And then at those times too, you have to start, telling children where they're private. This area is private. This area, nobody should, be able to touch this area. Nobody should be able to. What I do when, I need to examine a child, when parents bring their children, is I always tell the child, and I say it, in the hearing of the parents, and I say, this is, I'm going, especially when I have to do like a, vaginal exam or, a penile exam or something like that. In pediatrics, I examine everything. So especially when the children are older, and I tell them, I'm like, I'm going to examine, is this okay? Right? Exactly. That consent, right? And then they'll say, oh yeah. And I always say,
but the baby will say no.
Exactly, no. And then I tell them, no, it's very important. Nobody else should be looking at this. And they should, I'm here with mommy, I'm here with daddy, so it's okay, right? Again, so that you're able to examine the child, but this is your private part. Nobody should be able to take. So as a pediatrician, those are some of the things I say so that the parents hear it as well. And then usually around that age of 5, you sort of start talking to them about consent, like saying no.
Yes.
I know in our climb, one of the things that we've done, so anybody wants to do anything, they'll say, you're allow them to do it, or you're a child. But I think it's important to teach children how to say no.
Yes.
Right? This is my private part, and anybody that comes near or wants it, you say no. Right? So that no is important. And you start sort of having those conversations with them. They ask questions, where do babies come from? Oh, and at their level, you try and sort of explain those things to them. When they're older, talking about sex and sexual assault and sexual abuse, those are conversations that we need to have.
Yes.
And a good way to start too is like, what do you know about this? Ask them the question.
You'll be amazed.
You'll be amazed at what they know. Amazed. And sometimes
you are the one in the dark.
Exactly.
You have seen.
And sometimes they have the wrong information.
Yes.
So it's your job now to correct that,
yes.
But to be very open. A lot of people that abuse children actually use fear, right?
Yes.
So, or they tell them, it's a secret.
It's a secret, yes.
Exactly. So it's
yes.
important to be able to reinforce that in children. Like, there was an example of somebody that was abused, and the person that, sexually abused her told her, if you tell anybody, I will kill your parents. So imagine the
yes.
fear that child had, and they never said anything.
Because they don't want
their parents to die. Want their parents to die. Right? So it's important that nobody can do anything. You can always tell me, and there's no secret. All the secrets.
Mommy can be.
I'll protect you. I'll
yes.
keep you. And then also when they tell, what happened.
Check your reaction.
Exactly.
Control your reaction.
Control your reaction, and then make sure you don't.
It's hard, but
make it seem like it's their fault.
Yes.
Or they'll get in trouble for saying that thing.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And another good thing, another way also is if they see it happen to somebody else. Right? It might not be your child because
yes.
you have secured your child now.
Yes.
Your child can say no, and the perpetrator knows this child, I shouldn't be messing with them because
yes.
But there's another vulnerable child that your child might have seen something happening.
Yes.
So it's also important to tell them to
yes.
to be able to tell you that, and also have time. A lot of times we're so busy. The child wants to say something and then we don't give them that time to be able to have that conversation. So it's important to have that conversation and make that time to have those conversations when they want to say something. Sometimes, of course, you're busy and they want to know.
That comes like 20 times, like 10 times.
I know.
Like every 10 minutes, mommy, I'm like, OMG, what do you want to say now? So it's hard to listen to everything.
Exactly, it's not everything, but sometimes you can tell, yes, like there's something
bothering
different,
them.
something that's bothering them,
yes.
something, and
yes.
it's to take,
take time,
take
and
that,
pause.
and then
yes.
create that safe space where they can tell you anything. And once you have those conversations are ongoing.
Yes.
Then it gets easier, right? And it's easier for your child to approach you and tell you. As a pediatrician also, like, just safety and sexual assault, there's a certain age that I spend time alone with the child. And I
yes.
tell the parents, I at this age, I'm going to start having this conversation, and the conversations I'm having is confidential. And I tell the child it's confidential. Right?
Yes.
And this is
very
another
important.
Exactly, very important. This is another reason why well child checks are important, right? You see your pediatrician, you see the doctor over there, you build a relationship with them, and it's easy. And I'll
yes.
keep that in confidence, unless it's something that's going to be harmful to them, anything life-threatening. There's certain things that we need to disclose to the parents, but there's certain things that
yes.
they may not feel comfortable telling their parents. So there should be a place where they can say those,
so
things,
they can be
right?
safe. Yes.
Exactly, so they can be safe.
Yes,
and so usually I tell the parents, right, they become a teenager now, right? Anything questions you have about your health, I direct the questions to the child now, yes. right? So that they can start also taking ownership of their health and things that they need to be doing. I ask them questions. How can you do this
yes.
instead of the parents? But and start having those conversations. And it's funny because some parents are like, "What do you want to tell my child?"
without me. I'm not leaving this room.
Or you must tell me what. But I was like, then you're defeating the whole purpose. If I can't have that confidential conversation with the child.
I must add that people should know that most cases of abuse that we've seen, like even the sexual and gynae, is done by someone close.
Exactly.
Most times we look on the outside for the perpetrator, and there are pedophiles and people outside that could be of harm, but a lot of times there's someone that your child is in contact with, and so don't blow off anybody. Be observant, watch, don't leave your like my girl child living online, and this may be an overkill. I just have a common rule not to leave my girl child with anybody unattended, or have two people with the child. And I did the same with the boy child. I said, you know what, there's going to have to be somebody else with my child, not just one person for a long period of time. So if they have lessons, there must be somebody else with the lesson children. It's not saying that this person is bad or no. It's just a rule that I applied as another safety measure to make sure that we're in a crazy world, just to make sure the child is safe and nothing that's going to harm anybody. And then also watch what we say. A lot of times you're talking with your friends and someone says, if anybody touches my child, I will kill the person. I will, that person will not survive the next minute. Your child is like, and
mom is going to become a murderer, and then they reason things and they're like, you're going to go to jail.
I'm not telling my mother's going to kill somebody. Do you understand? This person touched me in a funny way. If I tell my mom is going to be my father. Men also fathers have a way of not being able to handle things as much. And I'm not generalizing, some, okay. And, and sometimes, you have to watch your reaction to certain things, your reaction to how you react to different, and that's something I'm working on, because if you think about I really want to kill somebody, but you have to watch your words and all of that, I think also, because it's hard. Even in the doctor's office, I don't know if you experienced that, you're talking to a child about, okay, so have you started having sex? Before the child could say no or yes, the mother, of course not. Of course. And the posture change. And you're thinking your child, even if she's having sex, she will not say a word.
Exactly.
Rather die than answer the question.
Exactly.
And that's why you ask them to step out of the room.
Exactly. But you brought up a really important point. Is most sexual abuse happens with people that the child knows. Right?
Yes.
And we're talking about how do parents protect, how do parents safeguard. Parents too can be perpetrators of this abuse.
Yes, definitely.
So it's important to also, the safety things you say you have with your child. The best way to protect your child is to be involved. We're working with women. Yes. You can be with your children. We have nannies, we have drivers, we have cooks, and you'll be surprised that sexual assault cases that
even family relations,
cousins, uncles, like those family relations, and there's so many stories you hear over and over and over, and it's family members that actually perpetrated the abuse. So you have to be exactly vigilant, and a lot of physical abuse happens with also nannies, right? They get frustrated, they beat your child, there's certain things you have seen things on you, just crazy things that they can do to so it's when you're involved and you ask the questions, right? You might not be the person that gives your child the bath, but find time to examine, see what your child's body looks like, right? They might have given the child put on the PJs and they're bruising that you could have noticed, but you didn't, you weren't able to see that. But it's important to try and be involved and also see what's happening. We talked about, social media.
Yes.
You need to check. You can't check out of, and
no, you can't.
We're busy, we're tired, exactly. But you have to, that's the best way of protecting your child.
True.
Always knowing, and asking, the child the question. And always reinforcing and having those conversations.
I think that's important, because one of the things that this episode I really wanted to do was get parents and caregivers to be aware. Even schools, don't take where you put your child lightly. I mean, I can't not get out of my head one, I think something that was circulating went viral on WhatsApp and stuff about a child being beaten in a class. I don't know where that was or what country that was, but it's heart-wrenching. And, sometimes I always want to know that the school has cameras in different places and the teachers are trained to handle their frustrations. And I rarely hear it. I mean, haven't really heard it in a school, but even that kind of abuse, and also child-to-child abuse, bullying.
Yes,
all this
that happens.
People don't think this is abuse. They're all a form of abuse, however it's dished out. And I think that we should not leave the school environment. What do you think?
Exactly. No. That's really important. There's a really sad story of a sexual assault case where, the parent left the child, and they couldn't get to the school on time, and the teachers had left, so they left the child with one of the guards there. And a girl child, and that's who sexually assaulted the child. So things like that.
Yes.
Schools have to be more conscious about these things. Who are you leaving the child with? Like, why would you leave a child with
a male guard?
But I'm sure they didn't think about things like that, but these are things that schools need to think about as well. We talked about it's not just sexual abuse, right? Food, and I think it's important that they train in the Heimlich maneuver when children are choking. There was a recent case that a child passed away from choking, and nobody was able to do anything about that, right?
Yeah. And I think it should be mandatory that every school should have a training in just the basic support that we talk about, choking, like the immediate support. First aid should be done.
Basic support training. And somebody there should be able to do that
Key
as
staff
well.
should be able to do that.
Exactly. And I think, again, we grew up in a time where, in schools, boarding schools, beating and all these things were.
Yeah.
But again, it was abuse. And I think parents need to be able to, see what kind of discipline is meted out in the schools. To be able to also have that conversation. Look, do not. There's certain lines and boundaries that, you don't cross with my child. And then having that conversation if anything happens as well. And, being able to talk about it, asking how was school, what happened, did anything happen? And sometimes you see injuries on your child and how did this happen?
You have to inquire. Yes.
Exactly. How did this happen?
Yes.
And, going back to does the explanation match the injury? Because sometimes it does not. And you're like, okay, no.
That's important. Yeah. That's important. Now, is there any, I don't know about here, but we talked about process, right? In terms of, the role that we play, or doctors or pediatricians especially, because pediatricians are the ones that see children.
Yes.
The roles that you play, like when you now suspect a case, how do you handle it in the office? I just always wondered. I talked about the hospital case where I didn't really see any help, but in the clinic, in places you've been, how do you handle the suspect? Do you just get another pediatrician to sign off? Because I don't feel we have a process here. I'm not that. I'm sure of that. Will not go screw one way or the other. That will just go through the right process, and I don't know where they will take the child to that'll be better or safer, or so I keep wondering, how do you handle when you see this case, this child is being abused, this child needs to be removed from the home or taken to somewhere safer so we can investigate? And how does that work in our client? Because some parents will hear this, I'm like, okay, even though I see the child's abused, what happens? And some women, or in some homes, men or women, there's domestic violence, there's abusive on a spouse and children.
Yes.
So have you ever had this calamity?
All the time. This is a really, really hard topic.
It is.
Because again, it's very difficult in our climate. Things are not set up. What I tried to do, and especially in organizations I worked with, was also, as pediatricians, healthcare workers, is also to try and set up protocols within your organization, within your office, of what are you supposed to do when there's sexual assault, when there's sexual abuse. There's a protocol that should be set that healthcare workers can follow, because there's so much confusion on what is out there, what can I do, how can I report. So one of the things I think as healthcare workers we can do is, number one, document. You have
every single thing you
document every single thing in your notes, and document properly the history, and then the physical exam, what you saw. And sometimes you take permission to take pictures as well, right, of the injury, because sometimes after a while those things heal and you don't see them again, but to be able to take pictures as well and document that. So it's important in the least to be able to do that, because you can support a case if it goes to court, right? Everything is documented, everything is there. Beyond the documentation, there tests that we carry out, once there's assault, right? You treat the assault, you test them for STDs, prophylaxis that needs to be given to the child, that they need to take, those things too as healthcare workers that we need to do. And then I think just as important as the medical side of it is the psychological side.
That's the part I wanted to make sure,
of it.
Don't ever ignore the psychological impact of abuse.
You've have to address that. Yes. You have to address that. A lot of people that perpetrate abuse have been abused.
Yes.
So how are you going to stop that cycle, right?
Yes.
So we need to be able to take care of those children, right? These are the victims, and one of the things we talked about is not blaming them. This was not your fault. Under no circumstance. Some people say, why were you there? Who sent you there, right? And then you're blaming the child, the victim. So how are they supposed to? And to be able to provide that support, we need to be able to find that within every environment, psychological support.
Yes.
And there are places, in Abuja and in Lagos or and wherever you are, just try and, find that. There are toll-free numbers the federal government has toll-free numbers.
I think the FCT has. I don't have that number on me because it's not, this is where private and government sometimes disconnect. But a lot of times I always say that we have to work together on this because the government has to be able to engage private health sector to say this is what needs to be done in these circumstances. We hardly have engagement or forums or webinars, seminars, or anything that allows us to understand the process. But I know that the social development, I think Secretariat and FCT has like a number or something that you could call. But I do not know the process, which I think we need to bring this on as another episode. Bring someone from there to tell us, okay, let's share the process.
Exactly, and what happens, right? One of the things you talked about is like what happens when they change the story. I don't want to report, because I see this a lot in cases.
The parents will
be like, I do not want this reported.
Yes.
A lot of times because the purpose.
And we send the child back to the danger.
Right?
Yeah.
One of the things I try and do is like, okay, right? I can't make you. In the US it's different. Once you're mandatory,
you must report it.
You must report.
Nobody can change that.
I'm not 100% sure on the laws here, but report to the police.
Yes.
What happens after that is right.
I think that's my problem is that am I making it worse for the victim now? So that's why knowing where that child is taking the process, the social worker, is she trained for this? Is there a psychologist that's going to be dealing with the child? Where am I sending this child to? Is it going to be now throw a child into maybe a foster home that's unkept and maybe more abuse? Or so I think for us is maybe one day we have two of us coming together again with somebody there and having that conversation.
Exactly, and knowing sort of what the process is. Because again, okay, the parents want to report now, like you call the police, like what happens? And it's a whole process, getting somebody, arresting them, court dates, and but as healthcare workers, we should also be able to provide, this is why I say documentation is important, right?
Yes.
That support when the case goes to courts, when the case, is actually reported. But it's also important, I always ask them, like, so, for example, it's a cousin in the home. Before this child is the cousin going to be removed from the home? Right? Or is this person, are they going, before you send the child back into this unsafe, but sometimes they just disappear. You call and follow up, and unfortunately, like, they don't want to report.
And that's
they don't. And some parents too don't want to they're like, no, we're going to pray about it, or they want to keep it very hush.
Yes, let nobody hear about this.
Let nobody hear about it, but that does not serve the child.
But that makes the victim, the child, feel so much worse. And then you wonder why she has behavioral issues.
Exactly.
This is why she has
This is why she's acting out. This is why, this is happening. This is why that's happening.
And higher promiscuity too.
Exactly.
They now become that you're so scared about.
Exactly.
Yes. All right, so we're very come to the end again. I said the conversation, we have to come back again and really speak more about this topic, because it's one that I think we need to deal with on the healthcare level, but also on the state level, national level. We need to all merge together to protect our children.
Yes, absolutely.
So what advice now, what's the last word do you have for parents for in terms of wellness, especially parents who are hesitant to seek medical care or wellness or discuss concerns about their child's safety or well-being. So what advice do you have for parents? What last word would you leave with them?
So, parents are really good at taking kids for immunizations.
Or caregivers, yes.
Yes. And I think, the well child care should be incorporated with the immunizations. It's difficult for parents, and we don't do this a lot, but it should be part and parcel of immunization and well care. Need to go hand in hand, because parents do bring their children for immunizations.
Yes.
A lot of parents.
They're good
exactly.
At that,
So this is a time to capture them and have that captive audience. But it's also important for parents to ask questions of their pediatricians, like things we talked about. If you don't know something, ask the question. Don't, sometimes, we might be busy and we might not say some of the things, but it's important that parents ask questions.
It's very important.
And for us to be able to also provide those answers to the parents. Sometimes we get so busy, we don't talk about certain things, but to be able to have this conversation on the topic, and for parents to have the conversation. Don't shy away from having this conversation. Because then you open up, the avenue for, if anything happens, your child can come to you.
Yes.
And be present and vigilant, with your children, because they might not come, but you might notice something at some point in time. And the best person that can take care of your child, if you're not the perpetrator, is you.
Yes, if you're not the perpetrator.
Exactly. So to be involved in the child.
And we're talking also about physical abuse as well.
Exactly.
Because people might think we're only talking about sexual. We're talking about physical abuse. They're not, I beat my child. Okay, beat your child. But there's some beatings you see that are physical, plain out physical abuse. It's not just the corrective punishment, which I don't think beating is the priority. I know that some people will do it and in our culture, whatever. But I think that there's the beating that, I'm sorry, you're beating out of anger is abuse. Yes,
absolutely.
And we just have to check ourselves on that as well.
Absolutely. And then also not keeping quiet. So we talked about, parents, you might see something in another child or see something, say something, right? We like to just, it's not my business, right? But
it is our
abuse of our children, it's all our business. So I think, it's not just your child, but if you see any other child that is compromised in any way, that's being abused, neglected, speak up.
Very, very
Speak
true.
up and advocate for the child.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Hercast with Dr. Chito. We've had a captivating conversation delving into vital topics with Dr. Antonia Shigaya, shedding light on child safety, identifying abuse, and the importance of wellness visits. Thank you so much, Dr. Antonia Shigaya. Thank you. Hercast with Dr. Chito is more than just a podcast. It's a movement, empowering, educating, and elevating her life. Join a community dedicated to living their best lives, guided by experts and thought leaders. Don't miss upcoming episodes on Rapid TV channel 176 on Startimes. Listen now on your favorite podcast platforms and watch full episodes on YouTube. For questions, I know you will have a lot of questions with this interesting topic today. Just send your questions at Hercast Podcast and at Dr. Chito. And remember to follow us on Instagram and also subscribe on our YouTube page. All right, so take care and see you next week on our next episode. Signing out. Stay safe.